This video will be an overview of OpenRoads Designer Civil AccuDraw and corresponds to the ODOT training guides for Civil AccuDraw. Civil AccuDraw performs many of the same features and functions as MicroStation AccuDraw, but has expanded capabilities for the Civil Designer. We'll cover a few of these functions available when using Civil AccuDraw. For more information, you can also refer to the ORD online help. Before we begin, note that simultaneous use of Civil AccuDraw and MicroStation AccuDraw will cause errors. Close MicroStation AccuDraw when using Civil AccuDraw. You can toggle MicroStation AccuDraw on or off from the primary group of the Home tab of any workflow. To open Civil AccuDraw, go to the Geometry tab from either the Survey workflow or the OpenRoads Modeling workflow. From the Geometry tab, the Civil AccuDraw toggle is located on the General Tools group. Select the Civil Toggles menu and select Civil AccuDraw. This will open the Civil AccuDraw toolbar. The first icon on the Civil AccuDraw toolbar will toggle Civil AccuDraw on and off. The second icon will open the AccuDraw Settings. When you click and hold any command with a small arrow, you also get additional commands, options, and shortcuts. When looking at the settings, the options you see here are the default settings. ODOT recommends turning off the floating origin and context sensitivity. For more information on each of these options, refer to the ODOT training guides or online help. Let's look at some of the AccuDraw default coordinate combinations. Notice that when I change from the plan view to a profile view, the toolbars change from the horizontal AccuDraw toolbar to the vertical AccuDraw toolbar. We'll start with the horizontal coordinates. I'm going to start in the middle of the toolbar with the XY coordinates. XY coordinates are pretty straightforward. I'm going to place 2 points in my file here. I can change the active field on the heads-up prompt by pressing the Tab key. When I enter a value into each field, the field will become locked, and you'll see the padlock icon when I press the Enter key. I can unlock one of these fields by pressing the End key and then lock it again by pressing Enter again. Notice when I enter both values and move my cursor, it jumps to the XY coordinate values that I'm using. I'll accept that and accept again to place my point. I'm going to enter a second point. And we'll use these in future examples. Next, we'll move to the delta X and delta Y coordinate. This measures the coordinates from the last point or the determined origin point. Let's place a new point 75 feet to the right and 50 feet to the below the last point we placed. Place my point. I'm given the delta of the X, which I want to be 75, and a delta of my Y, which I want to be 50. And I want it to come from the last point that I placed, but I can also select another origin point by pressing the O button on my keyboard, and then I'm going to select my point to give it the origin value. Once I've done that, I'll enter the values again here, and these should lock this time when I press the Enter key. And a negative value would go to the left, obviously. Oh, I actually wanted it to be negative 75. So now I have a new point here, a data point to accept it, and a new value is placed. Using the Element Select tool, when you select the point, you can see that the values on the manipulator text indicate the values that we just entered. You can change any of these values by selecting them and entering in a new value. And you'll notice the point changes. Next we'll move to the station and offset ordinate. Like the XY, this is pretty straightforward. You'll construct a point from a station and offset of a base element. So I'm going to place 2 points like I did before, with a station of 410 plus 50 and an offset of 150 feet to the right. And I'll data point to accept. I'll place the second point 411 plus 50 and 100 feet to the right. And accept, data point to accept that and place those points. Again, we'll use these couple points later in some of the other ordinate values. But what if I wanted to place 2 points using a different alignment? So if I move to this alignment that runs east and west, in this case what I'll do is place a line, and I want to select my new alignment. So what I want to do is I'm going to enter in my station value of 15 plus 00, and when I get to my offset, I'm going to press the O key on my keyboard, and now it's going to prompt me to select my reference element. So I'm going to select my alignment, and my station value is reset, but I can just enter that in again and give it another offset of 100. Let's just say 100 feet to the left. So I'm going to accept that value, and that began the I was placing a line here, so I began to place a line. Now I want to move down and change alignments again. So by pressing the O key again on my keyboard, I'm going to select the alignment of State Route 185. And now my station value can be entered based on that. And again, notice my values will snap to those points when I place it. And I can data point to accept it. And that's the station and offset ordinance. Next we'll move to the delta station and offset ordinate. This constructs a point at a delta station and an offset from a previous point. First I'll start by pressing the O key on my keyboard and selecting the center line as my reference element. Now I'm just going to graphically pick a point about 417 plus 75, about 50 feet to the left, just to start a line. Now I want to place my delta station 100 feet away from that point. So I enter 100 and press enter, and I want it to be at 100 feet to the left. So I'll enter 100 feet left, press enter. Now my cursor snaps to that position, which is approximately 418 plus 75 and 100 feet to the left. And I will accept it and place my line there. Now we'll move back to the left of the AccuDraw toolbar, and we'll move to the distance and direction from a common origin. Here what I'm going to do is place a line, and first going to just graphically select our data point to begin a line. Now I want to place this line at 150 feet long, and I want to place it at a bearing of south 20 degrees, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds east. Notice when I enter in the bearing there, I separated degrees, minutes, and seconds with a colon. And press enter to lock that value in, and now I can accept my second point. Next we'll move to the distance and direction from different origins, and we'll use 2 of the previously created points for this command. I'm just going to begin to place a line, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press the O on my keyboard to set the origin of the distance ordinate, and I'm going to select the top point here and enter in 50 feet from my distance. Notice I get the blue circle around that point, so everywhere I circle around there is 50 feet from that point. Then for my direction, I'm going to press O again and set the origin of the angle or the direction. So now for my direction, I'm going to make that be north 45 degrees, 0 minutes and 0 seconds west. So now you see the blue line is at that direction, and you'll see the light blue crosshairs where that line intersects 50 feet from my first point. So I'll data point to accept the beginning of that line, and to end that line I will just data point. And next we'll move to the distance ordinate. This will calculate a point that's two distances from two different origins. So if I want to begin a line here, notice that it's using the first origin is trying to use the last point that we created. So to change that, I can press the O on my keyboard, and what I'm going to do is slide over and use the green points that we previously created. Let me reset and start this over again. Place line and the origin. I'm going to select the first green point, and I want to enter a value of 50 feet to lock that distance. And then I'm going to press O again, select my second green point, and then I'll also select 50 feet. So you can see the two dashed circles are each 50 feet from their origin points, and the blue crosshairs are places of point where those distances intersect. So if I move from one side to the other, you'll see the light blue crosshairs give me 2 points that I can select. So to place a line from here, I'll data point to accept it, and then to end it, I'm just going to graphically pick another data point. In these examples, I use Civil AccuDraw to find the beginning point of a line or to place points. But you could use these to create any civil geometry, place cells, anything of that sort. Last, I just want to show how to combine two types of ordinates. So here what I'm going to do is place a line at a beginning, station, and offset at 200 feet long at a given direction. So I'm going to start with my station and offset ordinate, and I'm going to enter in 407 plus 25 at 0 feet offset, so it's right on the center line. So I'll data point to accept that line. Now for my end point, I'm going to give it a distance and direction. I'm going to use the bottom part of the heads up prompt to enter in my distance. Press enter, distance of 200 feet, and press enter. And notice the little arrows, the left and right arrows. So I'm going to use the left and right arrow keys on my keyboard to change to my line direction. So here I'm going to enter in my direction of south 65 degrees, 0 minutes, 0 seconds east. I'm going to press enter, it locks it in, and it will snap me right to that distance in that direction from my original point. And I'll data point to accept it, to place that point, and there you have combining two types of ordinates. And you could combine any of those that you needed to come up with the results you're looking for. One last point to note, using the element select command, you can see the values we used on the manipulator text for any element. And you could also change any of those values as needed. So if I scroll down here, and I can see that this was ruled to be 50 feet, the beginning of this line was ruled to be 50 feet from this top point, and I could change that to be 75 feet. And notice that the value changes. If I were to change this point, and let's say I wanted that to only be 140 feet from the center line rather than 150, I can change that there. And notice the beginning of my line also moved. Same thing goes for the station. If I wanted to change that to be 410 plus 75, should be also what. You know, you got to be careful. If you move it too far, then say the beginning of this point, it may not be able to solve for that beginning of that point any longer. So let's move to the profile view and look at the vertical AccuDraw ordinates. Notice when I select the profile view, you will notice the civil AccuDraw toolbar will change to the vertical ordinates. So I'm going to start with a station and elevation and place a line between 2 points. And my first station I'm going to enter is 390 plus 00, and I'm going to begin at an elevation of 1050, or 1015, excuse me. When I press enter, my cursor snaps to that point, or the crosshairs snap to that point, and I will data point to accept. Now I want to enter another station and elevation to end my line here. So 399.00 to 985, and press enter. And again, the line snaps there. It snaps to that point, and I just need the data point to accept it. Next, we'll move to the station and profile offset ordinate. This will place a point at a specified station and vertical offset from a reference profile. Similar to the horizontal ordinates, we will use the O key to identify our reference profile. So I want to start a line. In this case, let's say we want to tie into existing beginning of our project. First I need to select the profile offset coordinate, and I'm going to enter a station of 385 plus 25. And for my profile offset, I need to identify the reference profile. So I'll press O, and I'm going to select my existing ground. This could also be a proposed profile or another proposed element. And for my profile offset, I want that to be 0. So that was snap to the existing ground, and I will data point to accept it. Now I'll enter in my end station of 393 plus 00, and just for this example, I want to make it be 10 feet above the existing ground. So notice that it snaps to that point, and I'll data point to accept that to end that line. So now let's take a look at the station elevation difference, or the delta Z ordinate. This will place a delta elevation measured from the last point placed. So let's take a look. I'll start by placing a begin point at 395 plus 00 and give an elevation of 1033. And I'll data point to accept the beginning of that. Now on my second point, I want to end my line at 399 plus 00, and I'm going to give it a delta Z difference of 10 feet above my previous point. And then I'll data point to accept. So now if I were to snap to the begin point, I can see that my Z value was 1033, and if I snap to my end point, my Z is 1043. And last, we'll look at the slope ordinate. So this will place a point at a defined slope from the last point placed. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and start with another line, and I'm just going to use my last point, or the last line that I just created. And then I'll change to my slope ordinate, and I want to end my line at 405 plus 00, and I'm going to give it a slope of negative 5%. So when I do that, and I data point to accept, now I have a line that is drawn at 5% from my last point. Both the delta Z, or elevation difference, and the slope ordinates had a defect that I noticed in the 2019 release 2 version. Could have even happened in previous releases. Those have been fixed with the 2020 update. So if you're using an older version and these commands are not working, or these ordinates are not working, consider upgrading to the latest version.